Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Zach Taylor. I'm the Digital Lab and Online Learning Manager here at the Santa Fe Workshops, and we are just about ready to get started. If you're hearing me, seeing this screen, you're all set to go. One final reminder I want to give you all that if any portion of the screen you are seeing currently is cropped on your end, at the top of your monitor, you will see a View Options button. There you can adjust the ratio of your monitor to be fit to screen. That will prevent anything from being cropped on your end during the presentation. At this time, it is our 6 p.m. Mountain Time start time. So at this moment, I would like to invite in Reed Callahan to get the program started. Reed?
Thank you, Zach. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us once again for another Creativity Continues assignment. Tonight, we kick off the 5th assignment, which is called Altered Images. And that assignment will be judged by Aline Smithson. And let's see, you have a couple weeks, you have 3 weeks to submit images to us via our website. And Aline will get those the end of May. And then on June 2nd, Wednesday evening, she'll join us again and she will pick 20 images. And I hear she'll probably pick a few more than that and talk about those images. So this is a month-long festival, if you will, of handmade altered images, which Aline will talk about. This is a lecture where she's going to talk about this idea of our desire to put our hands on and sew on and rip up and kind of combat the digital arena with a more handmade arena. But I'll let her talk more about it. She's the expert on it. I will say that a year ago, or a little over a year ago, when we realized that we were not going to be able to do in-person workshops in Santa Fe, we started something called Creativity Continues. And that's been ongoing for the last year. And one of the most popular things that we do is offer assignments to our community. And you can think about the ideas that we put out there and make images. And then we have our instructors come in and judge those, not in the terms of awarding money or anything like that, but just take 20 images that they feel are worthy of talking about and then sharing those with our community. So we started out in April of last year, a little over a year ago, with an assignment called Reflecting On. And Norman Mouskoff took the mantle up and was the first instructor to choose 20 images. And then the second one was in May. It was the assignment was Windows, and Sarah Lean and Bill Marr were the judges for that one. In November, the assignment was Transitions, and Lori Klein was the one who chose the 20 images there. And then in February, Allison Wright judged My Holiday, and here we are in May with altered images with Aline Smithson. So it gives you a little history about what we're doing here with our Creativity Continues and with these assignments to our community out there. I want to thank Bostic and Sullivan, as well as Lenscratch, for being sponsors of this assignment. And you'll hear more about them as we move through this next month. And then with a culmination on that Wednesday evening, June 2nd. So I want to introduce Aline by telling you that she is a great friend of the workshops and a great friend to the entire photographic community, really worldwide. She's worked with us, teaching with us, and doing different programs with us for many years. And it's always a pleasure to work with her because she's just such a bright light in all aspects of our life in Santa Fe, educational, inspirational. I want to talk about Lenscratch because this is her creation. It started 14 years ago, and it is one of the most powerful, inspiring communities online that exist today. And if you don't know about Lenscratch, you need to. If you don't tune into Lenscratch on a daily basis, you need to. It's an amazing resource for all photographers. It's a showcase for images every day. They focus on a different photographer. One of the interesting things about Lenscratch is that it's entirely driven by people who love photography. They don't get paid for it. They're contributing to it gratis. And so they generate revenue by ads on Lenscratch and donations. So I encourage you to support Lenscratch in any way you can. It's also a tremendous resource. I was looking at the resource page today, and They give links directly to so many different photographic organizations, to blogs, to resources for competitions, for grants, for online magazines. It's endless, the amount of information you can glean from spending an hour or two on LensScratch. So as I say, Aline started this by herself 14 years ago, and I want to read for you her second post. This post is from November 12th, 2007. It's called Food for Thought. This is Aline's words. I had lunch yesterday with 3 of my photography friends. It was wonderful to reconnect and spend some time together, and it left me reflecting on that magical essence that connects people who take photographs. It seems that the ability to see and interpret, to feel compassion or interest, to feel part of a bigger universe makes for a remarkable group of human beings. I've rarely met a photographer I didn't like, or at least want to have a martini with. So martinis are on tap for tonight. All of you photographers, let's raise a martini to Aline and thank her for her devotion to the photographic community. And it's great to welcome her. It's my pleasure to welcome Aline to this Zoom platform, and to thank you, Aline, for offering to do this lecture for us tonight, offering to judge this assignment for us, and always a pleasure to see you. So cheers and martinis to you, Aline.
Thank you, Reed. I don't know if you've turned it over to me now, or
more or less, yeah. It's kind of your turn to take over and lead us through the next, I think, 40 minutes. I do want to say that Aline is more than happy to answer questions that you may have as she moves through her presentation. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a little Q&A feature, and we encourage you to just type in the questions you have, and then Zach and I will take turns at the end of Aline's presentation and ask your questions for her. If you have questions for Zach, or you want to make a comment about the presentation to everybody, use the chat feature. Don't use the Q&A features. Let's try to separate those two. Chat is one thing, Q&A is the other. I think that covers the particulars. So yes, Aline, the stage is yours. Thank you. It's nice to see you.
Great to see you. I looked in the participant window and saw so many friends. I think we should just forget about the presentation tonight and just have a party. So hopefully one day we can do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this all works. Okay, let's see. Is that working for everybody, Zach?
Yes, you are there. Your video is coming through a little choppy, so I'll let you know if it slows down, but you are there.
Okay. So I want to thank Reed Callahan for creating an amazing organization, the Santa Fe Workshops. I've taught at a lot of venues, but I've never taught at a venue that is so professional, so warm, so well thought out. So when we get back in the world, I really encourage everyone to take classes in beautiful Santa Fe. I also want to thank Zach Taylor for all his assistance tonight, and the workshops in general for their passionate, professional, and inspirational celebration of photography that allow us to all expand our visual horizons. As Reed just said, besides being a photographic artist and educator, I've been the editor of LensScratch for 14 years, and I figure that I've written about over 5,000 photographers. And needless to say, I look at a lot of photographs. I watch photographers' trajectories, and I consider their places in history. And one thing that I have learned is that it's important to have some sort of transformation to take place to elevate the work. Now, in many, many cases, that transformation is simply in the articulation of the photographs, where the photographer shares his or her intentions of why they made the work. As you know, photography is about asking questions and deeply considering our world. If you think about it, it's a profound language that makes us into incredible storytellers. That's one reason I love photographers. When you think about it, all photographs tell stories. Travel photography is the story of an experience. Landscape photography speaks to the histories of the land, and so on. Okay, let me get to my next slide. Imagination is the only weapon in the war against reality. Transformation is what makes photographs into fine art. But there has to be thought, reason, and intention behind that transformation. We're going to look at a lot of work tonight, and I don't want to overwhelm you, but I want to inspire you to try one new idea that you might not have considered. Remember, you can't make a mistake. In fact, failure is an important part of the process. And surprisingly, failure is a gift. The importance of this effort in this month, where you have 3 weeks to make something, is to take time in your practice to play and experiment. Sometimes it's the simplest gesture that makes a photograph more evocative, like this simple stitching over a scar in Diane White's project, A Delicate Repair, that elevates this image into an almost visceral experience. Tonight, we're considering the importance of the artist's hand, in other words, a physical intervention with the photograph. There are so many ways to transform your work, but for tonight, we're focusing on work made where the photography is physically intervening with the photograph and transforming it for a reason. This focus, for this focus, I'm not talking about work made with Photoshop, like diptychs and triptychs or photo montages or double exposures. Tonight is about actually touching your prints and intervening with your photographs in a tactile way. So photographic artists are transforming what's in front of the camera by intervening with the photograph to create new conceptual considerations of the medium. I know that's a mouthful, but I just want to share a couple of artists who really have inspired me. Sometimes this intervention takes place in the use and processing of photographic materials. And a few of these early, there's like 3 series that I'm going to show you are shot on film, but don't fear, we have plenty of work and ideas for digital photographers. Discovering Matthew BRANDT's work really changed the way I think about photographs. For this project, which is called Lakes and Reservoirs, he used a large format camera to capture images of waterways, particularly in California. After he prints his photographs, they are bathed in a mixture of water collected from the lakes he just photographed. So think about it, that the subject matter is having an effect on the final image. And since that water is not pristine, the photograph reacts to it in unique ways, altering the landscape. And therefore, it's symbolizing today's ecological concerns about the deterioration of our natural world. So he's really thought through the process and how it affects his intention in making the photographs. These if you don't know his work, spend some time on his website. He's a spectacular artist. GALINA KURLAT's gorgeous, stunning photographs of degraded Polaroid portraits speak, and I'm going to quote her, to a layered consideration of memory, loss, and beauty. And each of these frames reveal a haunting trace of the subject, but the materiality, and materiality means the actual photograph itself, of the experience, of the fading documentation of a moment in time, reveals the aging skin of the emulsions that replicate the notion that we all end as dust. And it's evidence that our existence is slowly fading with each turn around the sun. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but perhaps this work started out as a failure. Perhaps, and Galina's gonna kill me if I've got this wrong, but perhaps she put these beautiful portraits in a box and discovered the degradation of the work and rethought about it and used that failure to really change the way that she was talking about photographs. I just think this work is amazing. On that same note, I want to just show a few of my images from fugue state, where I've wounded the emulsion of my film to call attention to the loss of the physical family portraits going into the future. As we live in a time when the next generation is not making prints, my children are not making any prints, or the realization with digital files that images may not survive into the next century. So when we think about family photos, it's really the sort of classic portrait photography from the turn of the century through maybe the 40s that have lasted. So I am wounding my own portraits with chemicals to call attention to the fact that this is all disappearing. Another way to transform things is also by a different process where photographers are foregoing the camera and working with historic processes to create art. During the pandemic, we saw a lot of artists returning to historic processes where it didn't require a darkroom or even a camera. And the person that is probably making the most spectacular work in this realm is Megan Riepenhoff. This is her series entitled Littoral Drift, and it consists of cameraless cyanotypes made in collaboration with the landscape and the ocean at the edges of both. The elements that she employs in the process, waves, rain, wind, and sediment, leave physical inscriptions through direct contact with photographic materials. And this incredible work is, she now has garnered one of the biggest galleries in New York from this work. And it's so beautiful. And I just threw in a couple of photos of Megan working. This is Megan out in the ocean. You can see that her paper was sitting on top of this blue plastic. And here's one where she's actually working on cyanotypes in snow. Cyanotypes have become huge again, and the Center of Photographic Arts in Carmel just had the past year a wonderful cyanotype show with lots and lots of artists working in cyanotype. So I encourage you to consider that as part of your practice. Another artist that we unfortunately recently lost, PAULA RIFF, was working in cyanotype and color gum bichromate. These are all cameraless images where she is really creating art through photographic materials. Another process that became very popular during the pandemic were lumen prints. And this is Brian van der Wetering, whose beautiful lumen prints of plants and food are just stunning. I'm going to go back. Okay, the next category we have is transforming by sewing or puncturing. And you probably all know Amy Friend's work. Amy uses vintage photographs, punctures them, and adds light behind them and reignites subjects with a new energy. They are permanently altered. So these are all vintage photographs. So once she pokes the holes in them, they belong to her collection. You know, they can never be out in the world in any other form. And as she states, these are photographs that were lost and now reborn. I just want to say on Amy's behalf, give this a try if you want to, but so many people have copied or replicated this approach that it's really hard for an artist when they come up with something unique and other people are sort of appropriating her methodology. So, I mean, these images of the boats are just so beautiful. So anyway, that's something to think about when you are making work and try to make it uniquely your own. Another artist who is using the needle in a really interesting way is Marina Font. And this is from her series Mental Maps that looks deeper into the psychological and emotional aspects of women. She's metaphorically exploring the complexity of the human psyche and its inner threads to further investigate female identity and exploring different aspects of it. So these are printed on canvas, quite large, and she goes back in with various yarns and sews over her photographs. And here is an exhibition installation shot. And then I wanted to share this where the yarns are coming out of the photograph onto the floor of the gallery. Really exciting. Adrienne Hughes, a dear friend of mine, is working a lot now with sewing on her photographs. And this was the first body of work that sort of made her mark in the photo world. So each of these are marked by a geometric sewn patterns that demonstrate the way wind, language, and memory travel. She had a very cathartic experience about seeing the icebergs. It's about how the wind carves itself into the icebergs, bringing stories of the past or present or future. And the geometric pattern mirrors the sacred viewpoints of indigenous and religious practices throughout time, viewing the earth as sacred, which is certainly something we need to be doing. But her new work, which is like a color explosion, I love this work so much. These are landscapes shot with a digital infrared camera during the wildfires in Washington state. And the infrared state allowed us to consider the communication between plants and trees. And her intervention with embroidery speaks to the fungal network that can signal distress if it were visible to the eye. I think many of you may have been reading about that there is a whole communication system under the earth through mushrooms and fungal plants that communicate to each other and to the trees. And this is such a beautiful and powerful and interesting body of work, elevated by the infrared and by the embroidery. J.P. TERLAZZI is an incredible artist. He is always producing amazing projects. Spend some time on his site if you want to. But he became very interested in his Italian lineage when he discovered family photographs of relatives he didn't know. So he wanted to find a way to connect himself to them. So he created digital composites of the photograph with new imagery, and then incorporated his own blood specimens on a glass slide or a glass circle. They're microscopic slides, and he stitched them onto the image to create new portraits as an archive and memorial that connects his identity with the past while preserving the present. Really, really interesting concept and way of working. And definitely the red threads are a nod to the bloodline. His new project is equally as interesting. This is called Widow's Weeds, and he explores the vernacular mourning photograph, these classic mourning photographs where the woman is all dressed in black, shrouded by black lace usually. So by hand stitching and reinterpreting the mourning project as objects, the images establish a dialogue with the original vernacular image as an archive for memory and loss. So you can see he has stitched on to the cuffs and where the buttons are and the netting over the face as an addition to this photograph. And then the presentation of the veiled photograph is just brilliant. And that's the back of one of his images. Liz Stedeke has been a longtime friend. She's always creating something new and exciting. I'm going to quote her. She says, "I cut out, obliterate, sew, embellish, and cover up elements of an image to draw attention to what is missing, what might have been changed, or what needs to be considered. Pieces are sewn together and dyed to congeal the elements and ideas together." I mean, this is something interesting that's happening a lot in photography, especially in old family photographs or vernacular photographs. We're concealing parts of the image in order to look for small details, like the way this woman is holding the stick. By concealing the man, we are really focused on the woman's gaze. And then this, fun ideas of putting two images together. And these are, I believe these might be sewn on the sewing machine. Her new work is printing out photographs on cloth and then wrapping them around objects like rocks and twigs to have new considerations of looking at photographs. The incredible Sandra Klein comes out of a background in printmaking And she considers her work to be visual poems and small stories that evoke universal emotions. She captures her images digitally, then she composites them in Photoshop and then intervenes with the addition of sewing and adding small elements to constructions to create a 3D image. So this is one of my favorites. This is a composited image. It's a self-portrait. But then on top of it, she has replicated all kinds of love letters that she has received through her life. And it's really a spectacular three-dimensional object. Many of the images in this series called Noisy Brain have elements that make them into 3D objects. If you can't see it, this is sewn with small sequins. And then here's an earlier piece where she is embroidering poetry onto her body. And there's something so visceral about this idea of actually taking a needle and sewing it into herself. Her newest work is about shadows. This is work where she is only retaining the shadow of a botanical object. And you can see in this image where she has gone in with stitching and then adding small elements of imagery to the image. Really, really interesting work. We featured this on Lens Scratch recently. Diane Meyer, for the last, I would say, 5 years, has been making a lot of work with needlepoint. She had a very successful series on the Berlin Wall that showed at the Klompching Gallery in New York. But she also has another project, which are family photos, where she has cross-stitched embroidery directly into the photograph. As she says, the images are broken down and reformed through embroidery into a hand-sewn pixel structure. So the idea that she is creating pixels with embroidery is a really interesting one. As she says, the images where the person is concealed by the embroidery, small, seemingly trivial details emerge, while the larger picture and the context is erased. Now we're going to look at transformation by cutting. And KK DePaul has a legacy of really wonderful projects where she is using sewing also, and cutting and layering. As she says, I'm a storyteller. My themes are memory and secrets. I've always been fascinated by multiple interpretations. My process begins with a collection of elements. As I begin to move the elements around, I cut them apart and reassemble, and a visual narrative begins to take shape. I see the layering of paper and photographic imagery as being similar as to the way our mind organizes memory at different depths, one over another, constantly shifting. I'm going to give Zach links to the Artist Intervenes exhibition that we had on Lens Scratch and some of the posts that went along with it. But one of the artists I discovered, and we're going to feature on Lens Scratch next month, is Maggie CALLAHAN. And I just fell in love with her work. What you're seeing when she cuts out a figure is another photograph behind it. She looks at this work as a way to preserve memories that outlive their original function. And as she said, the photograph was once held by a loved one, is now in a box selling for 50 cents. So though there's minimal alteration to these images, the subject's absence now becomes an important feature, a transition to a new identity filled with representation of place and allure. This was the piece she submitted to the exhibition. Love, love, love this work, because if you look behind to the left, you can see the landscape that is showing through the images. The same with this. You can see the pathway here that is now showing through this image, and the same with this. And I love these portraits with landscape where the face should be. If you are going to work with old photos or family photos, I highly recommend you scan them in and make a copy and don't damage your original prints. Part of the Artist Intervenes week was Ricardo Miguel Hernandez. He's a Cuban photographer, and his work functions both as portals and archives, compiling and reinterpreting past memories, and lots of interesting ways of combining photographs. Now, this kind of work doesn't have to be made using vintage photographs. This could be easily made with your own photographs, cutting them up and putting them together. And on this one, by slicing this and by simply moving the images, you're obscuring the main subject, which is the face. And that creates a really interesting tension. Kevin Hoth has created a lot of really interesting work. And this project is called Cut Flowers. And it came about when Kevin was spending a lot of time in the hospital. His daughter was dealing with a severe brain injury. And on his breaks, he would go out and bring his Polaroid and he would photograph the gardens around the hospital. Then he would take 2 of those photographs and put them in a shredder and recontextualize the 2 images as a form of healing. Greg Sand is using vintage and vernacular photographs. We are going to have a vernacular exhibition on Lens Scratch next month, and Greg will be our juror. This started as an exploration, as he says, of the overwhelming scope of humanity and human history and the insignificance of the individual found in vintage photographs. Quoting him, I wanted to find a visual representation of approximately 6,393 deaths that occur every hour in the world. And this series is called Chronicle Passing. And it's to try to understand this staggering figure. This is Natalie Obermaier's work. She not only cuts photographs, but she weaves them. Most of her subject matter comes from magazines, where she is oftentimes combining 2 fashion photographs into something new. And Joe RUDKO, I love his work. He gained access to a collector's archive of thousands and thousands of vintage photographs. And he has just been making remarkable work. He's definitely someone's site you should take a look at. He cuts and reorganizes found photographs to break the illusion of the pristine image. And it's very artful. He's really creating art with old found color photographs. Another artist who is really doing remarkable work on the surface of photographs, cutting into the surface, is Christopher Russell. And these ambiguous vistas were created by manipulating the light before it enters the lens. So I believe these were shot on large format, and they're very ethereal and out of focus. And he then further manipulates the surface of these photographs by etching directly into the emulsion of the print. So he takes an X-Acto knife and he carves into the print. Now, this is trouble because you could easily puncture the surface of a photograph, but they're so remarkable and they feel like lace. And the next one I'm going to show you is one of my favorites, where it's the ship, a ship, and then sometimes he will actually spray paint over a photograph, which I believe is what he did on the bottom of this image. He'll also spray paint over parts of the frame so that parts of the image are obscured. And then sort of the holy grail of cutting photographs is Christine Fesser. I believe she's a German photographer, and she creates these massive folded paper still lifes that have a lot of light and shadow. And then she photographs these massive constructions. And then she goes in and cuts into the photograph so they become three-dimensional. And when you see them in person, they are just so remarkable. Like, you're not really seeing the 3-dimension here, but here's a good example. Here's a few more. Okay, so we've seen a variety of transformations, and now we're going to look at artists who are forming by breaking up space. And this is a technique that you could probably all achieve. This artist created an image. This is a 4x5 shot of a bonsai tree, but then he cut the image into 9 pieces and printed it separately. Then put it back together again. I believe these were all printed on rice paper with small stitches that connect the photograph. And it really speaks to the fragility of these objects. And these are so beautiful in person. My friend Sarah Hadley has been doing some amazing work. And I just take a second and look at this image that she has ripped and cut and layered and painted and kept building up the surface of her piece. Most of these elements are photographic. And she was inspired to experiment with paint and collage as a way of telling stories that had multiple layers. She's also really inspired by Rauschenberg and the Surrealists, and she was a painter before she was a photographer. But tearing the photographs give them a forgotten quality that makes you immediately wonder what's outside the frame. And these are from her series, Untethered Histories. And I really encourage everyone to think about how they can layer their own photographs into something new. Really, really lovely work. Brett Hendrickson, I believe most of his work is done through scanning, but also then breaking up the image in a variety of ways and putting it back together, creating his own constructions. And then Russ Rowland is very experimental as a photographer. He rips and tears and adds and subtracts and creates a new way of considering portraiture. Our next transformation is by distressing and layering. And this is older work of Blue Mitchell, but this series is called Evanescent Energy. It's formulated by burning transparency film with an open flame. And he damages the transparencies, then they're scanned and stretched back to the original aspect ratio and printed. And this really, this is probably at least 10 years old. And I remember seeing it for the first time and being so excited by this way of working. Fatima Beg Moradi burns family photographs to speak about, I believe she is talking about her time in Iran and how you had to sort of hide your past, and really beautiful and powerful work. Bootsy Holler is in process of working on a series called Contaminated. She grew up in Western Washington near the Hanford nuclear site, and almost everyone involved in that project got cancer, and everyone's cancer was given a price. So if you had breast cancer, you might have gotten $20,000. If you had some other cancer, you might have gotten $50,000. So she's really looking at how the government dictated what people would get for their cancers. And she's using cutting and thread, adding a button to really, and burning. I think this person had throat cancer, to talk about this idea. And this work represents radiation. And then Priya Kambli, all of her projects are really interesting, and she's intervening as an artist with every one of them. This is such an interesting way to show photographs. I believe this is flour that has been imprinted with some kind of embossment, and she chooses what she wants us to see. Really lovely work. And you can transform by the addition of text right on your photograph. I'm sure you all know Jim Goldberg's work. This is his series, Rich and Poor. where he asked the subjects to write about their experiences right onto the photograph. And there is something about seeing the handwriting, about hearing their stories, that really elevates all the work. He started photographing immigrants and their stories. Really wonderful use of text and image. Of course, you all know Dwayne Michael's writing right onto the photograph. So I encourage you to think about this idea also. And then another transformation is by adding objects as another layer. Jordana Coleman's beautiful work in her book, Little Romances, where she has photographed a model, printed out the photograph, put it into another environment with objects on top of it, and rephotographed it. Quite beautiful. She was in Critical Mass Top 50 either last year or the year before. And transformed by painting or drawing. I'm going to also do one of these assignments. So this might be the area that I work in, but Kathy Cohn's incredible vintage photographs that are overlaid with her painting and gestures. And this is Renluka Maharaj, who has a show up right now at the Center of Fine Art Photography called Pelting Mangoes. And she said it's work that re-scripts and re-signifies colonial portraits of Indian women during a period of 19th century indentureship in Trinidad and Tobago. So she has painted over these photographs as a way to elevate and energize these women's portraits. And Irvin Johnson is weaving and painting over his photographs to make large scale portraits that speak to memory, social unrest, and the Black experience. And I'm going to end with two artists who are using a lot of these methodologies in their projects. So I think that's kind of interesting to see someone who is not sort of revisiting the same technique over and over. Cody Bratt's project about his family, he discovered a bunch of old family photos and went back to sort of research and reconsider family. So this one, he has taped text onto the image. This one, he has burned the image. This one, he has torn two images and put them together. This one, he has put in negative and drawn on and obscured the face. Another one with text and pairing two images. And another one where he's taken two images of one person and put them together. The other person is Amani Willett, one of my personal photo heroes. These are from his book, The Disappearance of Joseph Plummer. So he's using a multiple exposure photo in the background, but he has laid on top a book called Snowbound. This whole project is about a hermit that lived on his father's property at the turn of the century in New Hampshire. But he has redacted this poem down to just a few words. So redaction is also a really interesting way you can redact your photograph, you can redact text. So what's left is his days stretched untraced. He's layering photographs. He's sewing on photographs. I love this one. He's put pencil shavings over the head of the person. He's trying to not let us see what Joseph Plummer looks like. He's also cut out text out of a book and just put it on the page. And I thought I'd show you a little bit about what these look like in exhibition. All different framing, all different presentation, really interesting new way to think about showing photographs. I spoke at the beginning about the importance of failure, and I hope you all have some major failures in the next 3 weeks. And I think 3 weeks, I think some of my best work comes from failure. Oftentimes I'll get an image that isn't quite there. I'll get it back and I've like the exposure's wrong or something's wrong with it. And I think, okay, how can I transform this into something else, or how can I learn from it? And the other thing I want you to consider truly is the importance of play. If you took 1 hour a week to just play with no worries about how anything is going to come out or making anything perfect, I really think your practice will move along. So take one photo, add a pinch of humor, a teaspoon of color, and mix well. And these are just a few samples of things that I've done. This is a found portrait of a man. I added glasses. I added a smile. I added dentures. I added my Rolleiflex lens. And then for this one, I had a portrait of a young woman. I laid it on my floor. I just happened to have a blonde wig I put on her and used 2 of my Rolleiflex filters as sunglasses and just had fun. I've never put this out in the world. This was more for me. And I literally shot this with my cell phone. So I want you to remember, to live a creative life, you must lose your fear of being wrong. No one is wrong in their efforts to make work. So grab some scissors, rip some paper, throw a fried egg on top of a photograph and start playing. Use your hands. And I'm going to end by just sharing that I am so excited to be teaching for the Santa Fe workshops in San Miguel in October. My class is Photographing with Intention, Far From Home. And I'm just going to show you a few. This is the wonderful hotel that we stay at. These are some of the street scenes. These are some of the incredible locations. This is work that I made when I was there, not as a, I was there as a student. Last 2 years ago, we went during Day of the Dead. This was my class. We all wore masks, and this was our class portrait. And this was me. And I'm now ready and willing to answer your questions. So thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Aline. That was truly inspiring. The creativity showcased here in this presentation is stunning. It really is amazing. I think everyone's on fire right now. And,
Yay!
and take your words and go out and sharpen those scissors and get those needles out and rekindle that play that this work really instills in all of us. So thank you, Aline, for this great presentation. I really appreciate it. Couple of things, just definitions here. We've had some people asking, can you define what vernacular photography is?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because we are going to have a week of vernacular photographs, and I'm actually struggling with the definition. Usually when you look up vernacular in a dictionary, it's it's photographs that are ordinary, like your family photographs. It's not work made for art. So they're more humble photographs. They're about the everyday. But now that term has also been assigned to found and lost photographs. So there is that weird straddle line. So I don't know how to like completely define it, but you can mine your own archives of, you know, you in the snow with your dog is a vernacular photo. Your parents in their station wagon at the gas station, that's a vernacular photograph. But now old vintage photographs are also being called vernacular. So.
Okay. And then the other word is intervened.
So that's my own terminology. It means that you're actually putting hands on the photograph or you're transforming it in some way. So it's the same as transforming for me.
Okay. All right. One question from me to start off with is, in the world of fine art photography, is it fair to say that there's been a seismic shift of late towards this kind of altered handmade images as a reaction to the digital arena?
Bingo. You know, it's so interesting. I've been jurying a lot of competitions, and I'm always drawn to work where I feel like the photographer has added that one more layer of something. And, you know, sometimes it's just creating a diptych. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you know, sewing and puncturing and painting. It can be just really considering work in a different way. And, you know, a lot of photographers are returning to historic and to film. So there's that too. But yes, there has been a seismic shift. And when I look at work that wins awards and gets into things, much of it has been transformed in some ways.
Okay, so for the sake of this assignment, can people enter anything they want that's altered, even if it's just Photoshop? Because you mentioned kind of early on that this lecture was not about Photoshop or diptychs or triptychs, but more of a handmade. So in this assignment, what would you like people to submit that you would respond to?
You know, I think we all have prints that we have made that are not of a high quality, that we don't know what to do with. We've probably thrown them out, but that's where I would start. Start with things that are not pristine in your life. And try painting, try cutting, try reimagining, get out some old family photographs and combine them with your photographs and see where that takes you. I would kind of prefer that you don't do this in Photoshop. This is really about thinking about you're an artist in a studio and you're working with materials. Okay, all right. And obviously people are not going to send original prints. They're going to send digital files. So do your best to photograph your work or submit it so that Aline can kind of see the process as best you can. It's not perfect because we're not looking at original prints, but do your best in that process. I honestly, especially when I teach and I ask students to do things like this, I just want them to try. That's the most important thing. So I don't want anyone to be nervous about this. I just want people to be excited about all the potential there is to make work. Okay, perfect. All right, Zach, what do you have from our participants?
All right, I got a couple of questions, but first, a lot of questions, I want to answer this real quick. A lot of people are asking about the recording. This is recorded and it will be posted on our Creativity Continues page. You can go to that page on our website and watch any of the Creativity Continues we've done in the past as well. So I will make sure to get this up sometime tomorrow and check it out. It's kind of cool. We have a lot of different things to watch.
And I'll send Zach the links to all the Lens posts on this subject too that you can include.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'll start off with one from Roberta Rucko, and this is with regard to, I'm spacing on her name, Amy Friend.
Yeah,
Yes.
Amy Friend,
Artist?
right.
Okay. Are they, and they have a question about how they're being, like, I guess, how they're being displayed. Are they lit from behind? Is that how
No.
they're getting that glow?
They are lit from behind while she re-photographs them.
Hmm.
But the actual image is not lit from behind.
Interesting. Okay. So she's just taking a digital photograph of it and then making another print of that
I
photograph.
actually think she takes a film photograph of it because I think a lot of these are processed in the darkroom.
Okay, cool. That's my first one. And I'll ask another one real quick, just to give you some time, Reed, from Karen Bullock, which is elaborating on that question of what you can submit. Is it okay to submit lumen prints, cyanotypes, etc.? Are you considering kind of like alternative process photographs that aren't necessarily like manipulated or stitched into? Are those still considered intervened photographs?
I think for this, I'm going to say a big yes, because the artist's hand is present. You know, you are handling the paper, you are handling the chemicals. So, so yes, I mean, you're not puncturing or cutting or doing anything to those prints, but maybe you could. So that's a challenge. So yeah, I'm go for it. I mean, anything that gets you making something, I'm happy with.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, Reed, your turn.
Robert wants to know, as a juror in a photography exhibition, do you ever feel that the transformation has gone too far? The image is no longer a photograph.
Oh, hell yes. I've seen, and that usually occurs in Photoshop, where someone has just taken the slider and gone way, they have to take Zach's class. They've gone way off. You know, sometimes I look at photographs and think, what were they thinking? But, you know, there is this straddle of photography and art. And sometimes for one person, it looks too far on the art side. And for another person, it doesn't. So it's kind of up to the juror.
And you're the juror for this one, so remember what you said.
Go
Don't take
for
those
it.
sliders. Okay, Zach.
Okay, I got one here from an anonymous attendee, and I think it's a great question. Do you ever see photographs that are deemed too crafty? Like someone, it kind of borders that line of craft making versus art. Where's that line drawn, and how do you define that?
Absolutely, yes. That kind of goes along with over processing in Photoshop. You want a sophistication to the work. And I'm thinking back to, for instance, in the 80s, when hand painting photographs was a trend, a lot of people were photographing little girls in bonnets. And, you know, they just felt too sweet, and they didn't feel like art. They felt more like sort of craft work. So yes, you have to really consider the work in a smart way. But you know, all of this takes time. I mean, we all have to learn as we go along. So, you know, and again, jurying is totally subjective. So what I may love, Reed may not, you know, and that's just the way it is. So
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Okay, Reed, your turn.
Matthew wants to know, are there copyright issues when working with found vernacular photos?
no, not that I know of. But the key is to transform the image enough so the original intention of the photograph is not there. So if you paint over something or cut it, you're transforming it. If you're just showing the photograph, though, you know, thousands of photographers are just showing vintage photographs. So, you know, most of the photographers have died that made that work. So I don't think it's an issue. It's more about using contemporary photography as your own in your practice that have really gone into lawsuits.
And one question from me, is this work selling? All the work that you showed tonight was just so beautiful and so creative. Is it selling? Is it supporting these artists?
I actually think the object, photographs that are an object, are selling more than straight photographs. One of our attendees, Wendy Schneider, I don't know if she's still in the audience, is like on fire. And she adds gold leaf to the back of all her photographs that just make them into these precious objects. And she's selling like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Good. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Even more reason to pursue that, because if it is selling, because it's unique. Many, there's just one of a kind, right?
Right.
And once that's gone, and if it is unique, then it commands a higher price in the marketplace, in the galleries.
You know, if you think about it, everything has been photographed, but not everything has been intervened by you. So that's why I think this just adds a whole other playground to the experience of being a photographer.
Mm-hmm. Good point. All right, Zach, one more question from you, and then we'll wrap things up here.
Okay, I got one here that I like from Michelle McDonald. What is your suggestion to help photographers who have trouble writing about their work? And I'd like to expand on that, particularly for people who are doing this intervening. How do you explain sometimes when you're playing like that? How do you get to that point where you can describe what you're doing?
You know, this is really not the format for artist statements. That's a whole other thing. But I think that a lot of it is research. And Lens Scratch is an incredible tool. Like if you are looking for people who are working in a certain way, you go over to the list that says photographers and you scroll down to subjects and genres, and you can click on something like people are making work about family. And then you can read all the artist statements by people who are making work on family and begin to learn the language. And that's how I did it too. I mean, I literally keep a notebook. And when I see someone's statement that really resonates with me, I write down words and write down sentences. And I think a lot of it is just being a detective and really deeply considering your project.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, let's call it, we could go on for a long while, but we're already a little bit over our allotted hour. So thank you so much, Aline, for this really inspiring and a great way to kick off this assignment. So everybody get out there and play and puncture and cut and send us images. You've got a couple weeks to do it. And then again, on June 2nd, Aline will reveal her 20 plus images and talk about them. So upcoming events that I'd like to bring to your attention, two really important programs coming up, short programming, one with Michael Clark about best practices for archiving and storing your images so you don't lose your work. If you don't have a good strategy right now to save in 3 different places, then you're in trouble. And so Michael is going to tell you what he knows, which is a lot, about the process of archiving and storing your work properly so you don't lose it. And then Dan Milner, who is an evangelist for Blurb, is going to be talking about the explosion of interest in self-publishing, on-demand printing with zines in particular, books, not just through Blurb, but just in general, and the amazing things you can do these days with zines for not a lot of money. It's really an incredible way to get your work out there in print form. So that's the end of May. And then, as Aline said earlier, she's teaching with us in San Miguel in the middle of October. So join us for a live program in Great San Miguel de Allende, Mexico with Aline. So thanks everybody for tuning in as creativity continues at Santa Fe Workshops. And we look forward to seeing you again soon, either online or in Santa Fe or in San Miguel or in Cuba. Thanks again, Aline. Thank you, Bostic and Sullivan. We'll hear more about their antique processes and all that they do over the course of the next month as they help us to keep this assignment moving forward. Thank you, Zach, as always, and we'll call it a wrap tonight. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you, Aline.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Aline.